First and foremost, thank you, Ajay, thank you, Manthan, thank you everyone for being here. This is not a lecture, so because I am not a teacher, I am not a professor, I am a student. What I try to do is, since these things seldom have a structure and I'm just sort of thrown into the deep end, what I try to do in my head is try and anticipate some questions that may arise out of the book, may be in people's minds, and I also clarify a few things. First and foremost, for any of you who've seen the movie Talwar, it is not based on my book. So that question I always get, it's not based on my book. It's in fact wonderful that two independent projects such as this can take place, simultaneously. So, I'll keep clarifying stuff as we go along. The first question that always comes up is, why Aarushi? Why this case? I was just, having some tea and a little while back, and I overheard a snatch of conversation. And this is the kind of conversation that keeps happening, not just here, but almost everywhere where tea is served. Which is, where were you in 1984? I believe someone asked Ajay. Yeah? Oh, why not that? Why? Okay, so here's the thing. That as journalists or as individuals, we can pick and choose what we want to do, first and foremost. We pick and choose our causes, our protests, our work, everything. It is not humanly possible to write about everything. So, but that doesn't really answer the question that I pose to myself, which is, why Aarushi? I'll try and give you a sense of why. Aarushi because, in my view, this is a case that is in many, many layers. It is not just a simple murder trial or investigation. It is not about, or just about, who killed this little girl and the manservant. It is not just about finding that piece of information out. What it did for me, as I got into it, got sucked into it in fact, is that it revealed to me many things that for most of us is abstract. How, for instance, does our criminal justice system work on a day-to-day basis with all its grime and all its problems and all its dark humor and all its grimness? What does the inside of a courtroom really look like? Most of us as middle-class Indians, we try and avoid, in fact, interactions with the state. I know I do. I hate it when a cop stops me on the road. I try and avoid it. It's one incentive for me not to jump a light, for instance. Because someone might stop me and I have to have this engagement. I don't want it. So, as middle-class Indians, frankly, what we have done is, we've built a little cocoon for ourselves in which we live, where this idea of the state and how it functions is outside. We're all right for these things to happen to other people. What this case told me is that this can happen to you, me, anybody. What happened to the Talwars? That's one reason. Second reason. What are we like as, for me as a journalist, I'm a creator, if you will, of news. Not really a creator of news, but a putter together of news. Somebody who aggregates material information and then puts it out. How do I do that? And how is it consumed? So it tells you something both about the person putting it together and about the consumer. This case is a classic in that respect, on how news is gathered and how it's disseminated and how it is received. The other questions that came up and which sort of revealed themselves while I was investigating, or it's a very big word, investigating, I wouldn't call it that, I really was merely attending court. I was attending court on a daily basis and just witnessing things firsthand. What did it tell me, or what does this case say about, let's just use a neutral word, about the health of our criminal justice system? To me, over 2.5 years, the story it told is pretty much in my book. It could be argued that this is just the one case. All that happens here need not necessarily be replicated elsewhere. But I have a sneaking suspicion, having been to that lower court day in, day out, that really that's pretty much par for the course. In fact, I would argue, given the profile of the case and given how much publicity it got, the kind of care that may have been taken should really have been higher, because the scrutiny is higher. To my dismay, if I may say it, I found it was the exact opposite. What does it say, this case, once again? I'm just sort of subclausing with the why Aarushi thing. What does it say, or what does it do for an organization like the CBI or one of our investigating agencies? Why is it that this case was so important for them? I'll try and answer that in the course of this as well. What did the case do, or the way it went, what did it do to all the victims involved? That is, Aarushi, Hemraj, and the Talwars. They are victims too here. What did it do to their lives? I just covered the point about what the case tells us about society and media, so I'll come to that as well. And finally, this is a personal question. I get asked it all the time. Did doing this change mean anyway? Did I change in the way I looked at things, the way I worked? Did I introspect about my own trade and where we are going? The answer to that is obvious. It is yes. It didn't change me dramatically, I think, because the tools of my trade really are quite simple, and anyone can be a journalist. I mean, I don't believe that you require special training. You need to have a few things in place, which is a fair idea of the meaning of public interest and its opposition to what the public is interested in. If you have that sense, then half your job is done. The rest of it is grunt work. You need to get onto the train or the bus or the car, go to the damn court, go to the spot, take notes, stand all day, do all of that. But that's the easy part. The tough part actually is screwing the head on straight, which isn't as easy as it sounds. So let me just, before I waffle on about this, I mean, I'm presuming a lot of knowledge here on the part of the audience. Let me just take you through the story once as to what happened and where it's at the moment. I'll be as brief as possible after a drink of water. So, many of you may know this, but this is just for the benefit of those who are not really aware, and no fault of yours. I mean, Delhi and Hyderabad are a distance apart. What interests people in the north often doesn't interest people here, and vice versa. Now, in 2008, May 2008, in a very, very, very middle-class suburb of Delhi called Noida, a crime that wasn't supposed to happen there happened. And that crime was this ghastly double murder. Now, one of the things about Noida is all the television studios are also based there, very close by. So one reason why the case got immediate coverage, not the only reason, why the case got immediate sort of carpet coverage is actually quite a simple one. There were many, many studios very close by. And do remember that 2008 is around that time when there's a huge media explosion in India. Lots of channels coming up, competing. And the nature of television news is that you just have to go and get the bloody bite. You have to get the pictures, you have to get something, and then the story kind of falls in place after that. That's the nature of it. That's how we've made it. That's how we're consuming it. We seem to be fine with it. So, there's no one to blame here really, but it's just... So this murder happens, and it's bad enough because, it kind of meets for the television or news audience a perfect target group, the story of these murders, or this murder on the first day. Because it is a girl who goes to a reasonably privileged school, has professional parents, they live in a kind of middle-class idyll, like many of your housing societies here. They are not rich, or at least until now they are not rich. That transformation happens through the media once again, quite suddenly. Within about a week, they become very influential, very rich. So, which is odd. I wish it was like that anyway. So this murder happens, it gets its coverage, and then there was a discovery, which is the bizarre twist, is that 24 hours later, in the same building, another body is discovered, that of the supposedly missing servant. Now this becomes a thriller, and it's tabloid gold. As it often happens with tabloid gold, it consumes the airwaves for the next at least 2 or 3 weeks. In the case of Aarushi, much more than that. I'm referring to the Sheena Bora case, which suddenly the tap seems to be turned off now, and we don't hear that much about it, do we? It's all we heard about. In fact, I had a joke about it. The government was giving away spectrum. So I said it's so crowded, the airwaves now. So they're going 2G to 3G to 4G to whatever G. So I said, you just need perhaps for them to sell a Mukherjee. So and make some money out of it. So, that's very, yeah. As a serious journalist, I'm not supposed to crack these jokes. Anyway, so I just lost my train of. So what happened is that this case, it caught the imagination in such a way, because of all those reasons also. Just not the fact that it was bizarre, it was tabloidish. It was also because of the proximity of the studios and the nature of, I think, entertainment television also informed how this story was covered. You see, it's my view, and I've written about this, that the best sociologist in this country, the person who gets middle India the best, is not some professor at JNU or Jamia or wherever. It is a very, very talented lady called Ekta Kapoor. What happened with Ekta Kapoor, and this, her influence on media itself is profound, I think. With all the case serials, the underlying conservatism that was basically a subtext in our lives became real on television. The underlying idea that, that there are belief systems which are supposed to be preserved. There are traditions that are supposed to be preserved. That this is the way things really happen or are supposed to happen. That kind of got embedded. The last time I saw this happening, and I'm dating myself here, is with the Ramayana and Mahabharata serials on television in the 80s and 90s. It's a strange coincidence that it also, power structures in the center changed shortly after that. So, however, but what those serials did and how they affected news is that, first of all, they got brilliant TRPs. Everybody was watching them. And it rested on a formula. It rested on a formula that told you that if I give you what you want to believe, you will watch me. So if you remember, there was a slew of programs, some of which actually exist as well, even today, which are hardly about news collection or gathering or whatever. There's bhoot, pret, there's superstition, there's a lot of this stuff going on. And even the normal story, the way the normal story is covered, has become about addressing the audience in a way that we know this is what you'd like to believe, so we are giving it to you. It isn't about, look, we went out and got this. This is why you should believe it, because we've put in our work and you've tried to make a rational case out of this. Now this changed with, I think, with Ms. Kapoor, and what happened with her is that entertainment infiltrated news with her advent. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. Who am I to judge? But does it sort of fit in with classical journalism? Perhaps not. So that's really my limited point here. Now, to get back to the story, it becomes this massive story, and within a week, and with no investigation at all, this is part of my book, a conclusion is drawn that this is an honor killing, that the father is a doctor, therefore, and the cuts seem to be surgical, or whatever it is. And also that the conduct of these people was really not like those of what we would once again like to believe are normal parents. So there was a definition of normalcy which was a subtext to all of this, that it has to be, you must conform to a certain type of behavior in order to be innocent or guilty of murder. That leap I found was very absurd. How do you go from, just say, not crying to murderous, or feeling lost to murderer, or being a doctor to surgically slitting your daughter's throat? There's a lot in between that needs some explanation, right? I mean, I would think so. But apparently the UP police did not. And they went and put the story out. And because the girl was a minor, there was a hue and cry about this. The hue and cry involved the then a minister in the UPA government at the time, Renuka Chaudhary, who was from, in fact, this state, who said, look, this is just not on. You can't malign the character of a girl. The suggestion from the police was that both the girl and the father were equally characterless. And it was this loose behavior, really, that was the root cause of these murders. You thought about it, he said. Now that narrative was the dominant narrative for the first part of this investigation. Until there was such a hue and cry, and at that time, there's one little sort of context that I must give you. The Mayawati government, and Mayawati doesn't really get along with anyone, so there's no surprise she didn't get along with the government at the center at the time. So her government was under some pressure because of many other sort of lawless activities in Western UP, which abuts Delhi, as you know. It's a bad belt overall. It's like badlands anyway. But they were getting these strange killings in middle class areas and stuff like that, which is what really sort of exercised everyone. 2 years previously to this, 2 years before this, was this infamous Nithari killings. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But anyway, she was under pressure, and then finally it was decided that this goes to the CBI. Who is the CBI? The CBI is absolutely the top, the best, there's, I don't know, Scotland Yard, Sherlock Holmes, Poirot, everyone rolled into one. That's the CBI. So, they solve everything. So, just transfer the case and be done with it. And then the CBI takes over and then finds that, well, a lot of the stuff that has been said is quite absurd. So Dr. Talwar is now in jail, and others are being investigated. And here's what starts happening. Now the CBI functions as it functions, and it, in this case, displays very clearly to you how it functions. There's a change of guard in the CBI. The director changes. The director changes without this case having been tied up. The new director and the old director don't get along. What's new? And as a result of media pressure, by media pressure I really mean it was intense. It was intense because this story as a news story, news television actually forms a very, very small part of Indian television viewing. It's a very small part. It's mainly Ektaji who rules and people like such as that. So, and cricket rules. I love cricket. So, this story got more TRPs than cricket games. This is actually a first in news television. It only happens, the only other scenario in which it happens is when election results come in, say such as today. But then they are very careful not to announce results when there's a cricket match on. So, that too. So now there's this intense pressure to close, and it basically goes nowhere because the investigation per se in India, I mean, my book kind of explains this a little better. It isn't about, a lot of it depends on beating a confession out of a person and then putting that story together. Now this, for some reason or the other, does not happen. I've tried to explain it in the book, but it doesn't happen. So as a result, dead end. It often means, I mean, in such cases, often means, so in one line, no approver, no case. This is really how things work. For those of you in the audience who may be young or whatever, don't know, an approver is a state's witness who they do a trade with the agency or whoever is investigating them. They say, well, we will accept a lesser punishment so that we incriminate the real culprits. Anyway, no approval, no case, and the media pressure continues. It comes to a point where the new director just has to do something about it, changes the team, and says, well, crack it for me, please. Enough. That's really, I'm putting that mildly. Now, at this time, a year and a half has passed about. And what has happened is that of the 5 suspects, I include the Talwars and the 3 others who were employed by them and various other people there as 5 suspects. In my eyes, they are equal. They deserve the same scrutiny, because they are in that situation. Now, 3 of the others have just disappeared into the wind. They've gotten lost in Nepal or Chandni Chowk, who knows. And what happens is that Talwars are not just available, they are also keen that this case is resolved. But somehow, because of the non-availability of the others and the need to crack the case, this turns around onto them. And a whole other narrative is built. One of the problems, and this is why I said earlier on about the societal things that is a learning for me from the case, is the underlying misogyny of our constabulary. I say this with great sadness. This is not the only reason why the case turned and took the twist that it did. But the average investigator, or policeman, or judge, just is not used to the idea of a strong woman. That person becomes the other for them. So, even when you're supposedly cooperating on something, you can be cast in opposition just as a result of that strength. This is not, I should say this is not a phenomena which is, in my belief, unique to India. I don't think so. I think there's a beautiful, beautiful book by somebody I admire a lot, someone called Janet Malcolm, called Iphigenia and Forest Hills. I recommend it to all of you. It's a very similar kind of case in the States where the problem, once again, is that the accused is a woman who, and she describes it beautifully, Ms. Malcolm. She says that she has the bearing of a defeated barbarian princess. So, and that is, immediately casts her as some kind of enemy, some kind of evil. And people just can't stand it. This is just one of the small things that happen. The other thing, and this is, I guess, a sign of our times, that happens is, and I noticed these details in the papers in the case. This is best told by an example. I am reading at this time a statement given by one of Dr. Talwar's friends as to what happened on the morning when he and a friend of his reached the Talwar's flat and what was going on there. And there's a bit about their own friendship. What was it like? How would they meet and stuff like that? So the first couple of paragraphs of this statement, which is really should focus on the evidence that they saw, what they saw on the scene, the first couple of paragraphs read somewhat like this. Dr. Talwar would throw many parties. Liquor would be served at these parties. And even though it was Thursday, non-veg items would be provided. So, it told me something, and this case is littered with instances like this. That is what makes it layered. That's what makes it interesting. Who cares whether someone has a drink or not? Who cares? Who cares if you have, as they call in the South, envy items? So became strang. So no, you don't care. So, I mean, this is a murder case, for God's sake. It's not like about someone's face or how they walk or talk or nothing like that. But it's littered with stuff like this. Now, once, this die therefore is cast, and then the wheels move and they move in only one direction. Where I'd sort of like to move it on to is a couple of points which are most serious. And I'll just throw some questions at you rather than you throwing at me. So now, where, for instance, do samples collected by the CBI go? They go, first and foremost, to a forensic lab controlled by the CBI. I find that very odd. I mean, one can argue that, well, it's a scientific lab. It's independent. But you see, I've also spoken to the director of the lab. And I've asked him, what's your relationship? Is there a hierarchy here? You may not technically be an underling of some sub-inspector there. But really, if he asks you to come to his office, can you refuse? If you're going on leave, you kind of have to at least let him know. Maybe he doesn't sign. That's exactly how it is. It's in the same complex as the CBI headquarters. And why do I need to even argue this case further? It's a Central Forensic Science Laboratory, CFSL, but it's called CFSL CBI. What more do you want? So the independence of such a laboratory is, in my mind, at least questionable. It's more than questionable on the evidence of this case. Because scientists from this lab came and testified falsely. Yes. About what went on and how things went down. That's part of the book, and I hope you'll read it. What are the other labs involved? One is here, a very fine lab called the CDFD. I hope I won't get shot. Anyway, if someone's here. But it seems to me that the agencies have a kind of control over many of these laboratories for two reasons. One is that many of them are being investigated themselves, like men in the CDFD, by the CBI. This is a problem, right? The other is that a lot of the business in forensics comes from there. So there's some, there's something wrong here, I think. This is the sense I get. So if you ask them simple questions like, what are the guidelines that you follow? Do you follow, say, the sort of international guidelines that labs in Singapore, London do? Do you follow NABL or whatever? Has someone put something down for you? Even about information like this, they're extremely opaque. They will tell you it's all up on the website. But really, it fools no one. Because when you ask the specific questions of them, they will not be able to answer for you whether it meets the guidelines or not. This has happened to me in my experience. For instance, and this is the reason I bring it up. I hope I'm not getting too technical or too boring. A crucial piece of evidence in this case actually came to this city, which was the only piece of direct evidence linking anybody at all to the crime. This was a pillow cover on which there were flecks of one of the victim's blood, that's Hemraj's blood, which was found in the home of one of the other 5 suspects. This lab returned this finding, that the DNA, Hemraj's DNA, has been found on someone's bedding, and that person does not live in the flat. They live some blocks away. The simple question is, how did it get there? Why would someone else's blood, fly and get onto, a third person's bed? It's impossible, right? So some investigation is required. But although the CDFD says this, there is no investigation because nobody spots this. It's a plain and simple report. It's actually not so plain and simple. It's filled with jargon. So although it's self-interpretable, the investigators don't spot this. The defense or the Talwar spot it. Say, look here, you're charging us with this, or you're going after us, but look at this piece of evidence. So now, what happens is that an officer from the CBI rips open the sealed sample that has been sent back from the CDFD, takes some pictures of God knows what, of these samples, shows it to a court with labels of his own, and says that actually there was a typographical error. And then comes back to Hyderabad, after showing all this to the court. Comes back to Hyderabad, and a letter is then sent from this very respected forensic lab that they find, yes, indeed, there was a typographical error. What were they doing for 2 years? What was anyone doing? That's the kind of question that this book raises. So, is it acceptable in your own heads? Is it acceptable for sealed forensic samples, for instance, that are only by law to be opened if a court orders or if a court wants to see? what's inside, to just be ripped open and then sealed back again however you want it? Where's the integrity of that evidence? What happens? And how can you even present that damn thing to a court anymore? I mean, if I take this laptop, if I swap this laptop and a book in two different packages, who is to know? That is why there are seals. But in this case, it seems to me that this is acceptable. We're all fine with it. And I say I don't say that lightly. Please try and remember that we pay for this system. The Talwars have been accused of a crime against the state. We represent the state. That public prosecutor, that judge, the CBI, they are there because of our taxes. So at least as consumers of the criminal justice system, I think, are we not allowed a question or two? That's my point. Are we all right, for instance, so that's the relationship between the forensic lab. The relationship with the court is quite similar. It's a CBI special court where judges are assigned according to some parameters, and it's actually a plum posting for those judges. It's less work, it's higher profile work, and the incentive, in fact, to acquit in any of these lower court cases is very, very low. The reason is not because the judge is illiterate or whatever it is. None of those reasons. The reason is again the media, because anyone who gets acquitted in, say, a corruption case, just say tomorrow Subrata Roy was acquitted in a corruption case by a lower court, then immediately all of the media will jump on the judge and say, well, you took money. That's why. So for him, it's so much better. Look, there's a 3-tier system in place. So I'll just write convicted and let it be somebody else's problem. So I mean, that's a part of the separation between, say, the scientific parts of an investigation and even the judicial parts of the investigation are not very clear. They are fused into one. This to me is not a very healthy thing. But then I could be wrong. I'll just throw at you some of the things that I came across in this case, which are, for me, startling. Okay, we went through this whole forensic, how they treat or their idea of what the integrity of a forensic sample is. So now, just if you want, say yes or no. Is it all right? I'm just asking you, is it all right for a post-mortem report, which is really the final document in a person's life, to be changed 6 times over 2 years? I mean, really. And changed in dramatic ways, terrifying ways, with terrifying consequences. Is it all right for a case, really, I explained this to you before, to turn on a typographical error that you're sentencing people to murder? Not just that, you're sentencing people to the murder of their child on a typographical error. I mean, that's the excuse. Is it all right? Is it all right for the investigators to create, for communication specifically with some suspects, an email ID as macabre as himraj.jalvayuvihar@gmail.com? This is the CBI doing it. Official mails from the CBI came from this address. They have a perfectly good cbi.nic email. Why would you do it? And how, I mean, what are you thinking when you do something like this? Is what I would like to know. Why is it necessary? Is it all right, following from there, for courts to accept this as evidence, as digital evidence? Is that fine? I mean, tomorrow, if I modi.massmurderer@gmail.com. I mean, create one and start writing official emails to people. Is it okay? I don't think so. I mean, use the damn official address. The other part about this is that they are so blasé about it that for 2 years there's denial after denial after denial. Right? And I'm writing reports to the Mumbai Mirror at the time, and I go through court papers, and I find that these emails have been submitted not just to the lower court, not just to the high court, but also to the Supreme Court. And no one has said anything about it. So I then speak to the CBI spokesperson, and I said, look, this email, is this official? Did someone really send it, or is it just a hoax, or what? Because they had said it was a hoax 2 years ago. I said, no, it's not possible. That's not possible. This was a rumor some time back. It's wrong. And I say, okay. Then why is it that it's part of your submission in the Supreme Court? This person then falls in the sky and says, really? So I said, yeah, look it up. It's there. Why would you do that? A very large point here. One of the other things that this case brings up as something to think about, is it all right for witnesses to be tutored? In this case, a critical witness was tutored. And I don't say this because I'm making it up. It's actually part of the trial court record. And it's something that the judge dwells on. And he justifies. He says, I'm sort of paraphrasing him, that actually it is all right for a witness to be tutored, provided she is, or since she is a bucolic person from a lower strata of society and she is very poor. It is therefore fine to tutor him or her in what is supposedly the truth. I mean, can you tutor anybody in the truth? They either see it or they don't. But this is justified. And for me, this is the first as well. It can change, the criminal justice system as we know it. Just this one thing. Because every witness in that case can be tutored. Because you're open to argument about who's bucolic and who's educated and who's not. I mean, lots of people think I'm illiterate, or bucolic, so just fine. So it's not. So it becomes then open to debate. More questions. As a litigant in a court of law of the nature that Ghaziabad is, who is it that you're addressing? Are you addressing the judge? My assumption is, yeah. I mean, I'm the litigant, I pray to him, I plead to him, I apply to him. It's really his wisdom that will either, redeem me or convict me, whatever. Now, is it okay for him to then go home, start writing a judgment in collaboration with his son, who I don't know? And is it okay for him to start doing this even before I have finished my argument? I haven't even in fact started my summing up. I haven't. And he and his son are writing my sentence out and searching for what is called good words, since it's a high profile case. As I, sort of fruitlessly I guess, and unbeknownst to me, try and say no. Here are like 23 circumstances why I am not guilty. The most important part of this, and I should really touch upon this before, stop waffling, I think you've had enough of me, is that to just go back to the original question of why Aarushi? Why not some other case? Why not 1984 or whatever? Some other thing. Why not Muzaffarnagar? Whatever. For me, And this is how I'll address the part about how I've changed, I mean, in one sense. This case has helped me understand what I think of now, and I put this really humbly, as a civilizational principle. And that is the presumption of innocence. The question in a court of law is never, can never be, has never been, from the beginnings of time, till the first illiterate people started writing things on the sand, whether a person is innocent or not. It is always on the evidence presented, are they guilty or not? It is not about having the onus of that proof or the burden shifted onto them in any way. It can't be. Then you will have chaos. Everybody will start accusing everybody else. This case reversed that principle from the very beginning. And it didn't do it merely in a court of law. What was interesting about it is that it did it in the investigation of this crime, in the media coverage of this crime, and in the consumption of the media coverage of this crime. What we tend to forget that our judges are drawn from the same stock as you or me. They are also consumers of media. Jurist called Benjamin Cardozo, who I keep quoting here and there, said that the tides that engulf normal men don't suddenly pass judges by. It's not true. So what happens is that a very vicious storm is created, where you presume guilt. You then investigate with that in mind. You leak to the media stories that fall in line with that thinking. The media reports them. Everybody else gets influence, including the courts. And I will say this without, with no fear of whatever, or some fear of contempt. But the court then validates this through what it does. The media then says, oh yes, we were right all along, but this is how we reported it. And the investigators sit back and think, what a fine job we've done. The cycle is complete. So one of the questions that keep coming up is that why did, the Talwars, why were they were kind of normal people. I have a simple test for, I won't say normal people, but who is middle class and who is not, at least in the context of Delhi, which is very hot, pretty much like Hyderabad. Which is that if I find in a living room, in a flat, that there is an air cooler rather than an air conditioner, I say, well, this person is definitely in the middle classes. They'll have an AC in the bedroom, or in a couple of bedrooms, but not in the living room. Yeah? So the idea that these people were very rich, very influential it came out of things like the discovery of a lawyer's business card in Dr. Talwar's pocket, or his client list as a dentist. He was a good dentist. I mean, he did have some influential clients. But the way this stuff was spun out was horrible. The other thing was, of course, the conduct, as in this is a crucial part of it. So, am I running out of time? Are you okay? Just let me know. Just do standard sign. So, where was I? The point was this, that the casting of these people as rich, influential, and debauched was critical to their conviction. And this has happened over a period of 7 years. A long time. So one of the things that was put out about this couple, I mean, if you meet Rajesh and Nupur Talwar, they aren't exactly, Adonis and his consort. No, they're perfectly nice people. Just normal is what I'd say. So, is that they were this orgiastic couple who had these wife swapping, they had this wild lifestyle in which the daughter came to know. I mean, the stories got more and more absurd, but On the other hand, they were not, because they were being reported exactly as it is. There was a story put out, for instance, that 12 rooms in a prominent Delhi hotel were booked by the Talwars for some grand orgy, God knows what. The whole floor must have been involved. So, yeah. Now, what troubled me about this, and this is for me it's personal, because it's my bloody trade, you know. I'm proud of it. Is that, okay, tell me, where's the attribution here? Who has been spoken to? How do we know this? Is at least somebody from the hotel saying that yes indeed, or do I have some kind of proof of payment that at least the rooms were booked? Do I have anything at all? Zero. Do I have even a bite from someone who says, yeah, I may have seen them walk in? No. Not even that. You run with the story, it's highly damaging, especially in that environment. And it kind of settles the belief, oh my God, that poor girl, it's good that she's gone, because she must have had such a horrible life. And she was threatening to expose these people, and that is why she just had to go. That narrative now fits very easily. Why? Because the parents are divorced. Now, the people who carried these reports, they quoted unnamed CBI sources. Yeah, that's my other beef. One of the reasons that my book took so long, apart from the fact that I'm very lazy, is that I did not, or I would not include anything in it which I could not attribute, either to a public document or to some kind of record which is official and kosher and verified, or to direct interviews conducted by me with people on tape, on the record. So for me it was unacceptable that someone tells you, you know, I heard X or Y or Z. So look, I mean, if you know, you know. Are you willing to be quoted on this or not? If not, I'll just leave it out. So there are a lot of shit that I've left out as a result of it. This book could have been much bigger bestseller. Anyway, but that's not how it works. I mean, that's not for me, because that discipline for me is important. And one of the problems with this case was the malign use of the unnamed source. I try and talk, when I talk to other journalists about this, I said, look, don't you get it, man? What is the unnamed source doing? He is building in deniability, right? He is telling you that, look, here's the story. Now you put it out. You go and put it out. The next week, the story is denied. False. You then go back to, other people go to the agency or whatever, say that your sources have told this reporter. They just simply turn around and say, what sources? What reporter? Who spoke to us? So you're already putting yourself up for this every time you use an unnamed source. That I know that many of the most fantastic stories in journalism have come from unnamed sources, like Watergate, for instance, Deep Throat. But that's a very special case. And I think this kind of gathering, you'll appreciate what I'm trying to say. As journalists, what we look at, and I touched on this a little earlier, is whether there is public interest in a story. The source must also see that, if he or she is unnamed. I mean, he can have an agenda of some sort, but there must be a convergence of this thinking. Just because he is a source doesn't mean that he's a bad guy or an unthinking guy. Like a whistleblower, for instance, whoever. He's not a bad person. I mean, it's not that everybody has an agenda. So there needs to be that convergence for a really good story to work out with unnamed sources, is what I'm saying. Because this kind of discipline, as in I will not use any unnamed sources at all. I've spoken to other journalists, they said, look, this is impossible to do. On a daily news cycle, this is not going to happen. So you can forget it. You can keep writing a book every 6 years. So, something like that. So that told me a little bit about, again, media as well. But to return to topic, which was, where was I? I had asked the other thing about, what this court taught me, or what this case taught me, was the idea of actually living the abstraction. That was nice. It was not always nice. So I'll tell you a story. I think what we were talking about earlier was whether it changed me or not, and how I happened to mention that many of the things, like how does a court work, what does it look like, all these things I feel are very important. I say in the preface to this book that it's a look at India from the ground. So it's not really just about the murder trial, it's also about other stuff. So the Ghaziabad court is a very special place in my heart. It is as much of a character in this book as any other sort of living person. I'll tell you a story about it, which is there in the book. It's a slight giveaway, but it's just a nugget that for me was unforgettable. So when I walked into court the first time, I found that it was slightly uncomfortable, in fact. I'm not that comfortable in the company of like guns and stuff. I don't like to be like sitting around. It's okay. If you see someone in uniform with weapons, I understand it completely. And that's not my discomfort. But this is not people in uniform. This is people just, roaming around with guns. So I asked one person, what is this? Why are so many people just walking around with these guns? What if one of them goes off or something happens? When a fight breaks out in Ghaziabad, is it always a gunfight? This was slightly worrying to me because I have to come back to this place every day. So he said, no, they do it for security. I said, what security? So I said, what? It's a court. Who are they afraid of, these people? So mainly it's the lawyers who do it. So I said, why? Because their clients are sometimes of dodgy, antecedents. He said, no. They are afraid of other lawyers. So one day I turn up in court and I find that the only court functioning is the court where the trial is taking place. I find out why very soon. There is actually chaos in the courtroom that day, because what has happened is that in another case altogether, a key witness who was the right-hand man, the Chota Rajan to a Dawood kind of situation, was about to sort of spill the beans on this Bhadoria character who was a big badland gang lord. And he was just being taken into court when a yellow Santro arrived with 3 lawyers in it, who for some reason were dressed not just in sort of black, their suit, but also bowler hats. And they went up to the floor on which this thing was taking place, shot this guy, and in the court, killed I think 3 other people, and then jumped off the terrace, off the balcony, onto the waiting Santro, just like the ad, there's an ad there, and made their getaway. So of course these people were not lawyers. In fact, it was Bhadoria himself who had come and conducted the shooting. But this is the kind of thing that actually happens in that court. And it is, if you don't, if you don't, are not witness to it, if someone tells you the story, you'll say, don't bullshit, you're making this up. But I am not. I'm a non-fiction writer. So Ajay, should I open this up to questions? Look, I'm sure you have, I could waffle on it. So, yeah. So, but if, sure, sir. You. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were leaving or something. I was quite disappointed.
No. No, I just wanted to say one thing.
Yeah.
That rarely do we have journalists with so much of intellect and insight. Thank you for that.
My God. This is... Thank you so much.
Actually, I wrote down a series of insights which you mentioned in your
Please
speech.
share them because I probably don't... I'll forget them
I'm
very soon.
sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Two questions.
Sure.
After writing all this thing, it came on the media. Did anybody approach you or try to intimidate you or create a flack on you?
Yeah, no. So nothing that I couldn't handle, frankly. So,
So somebody came to you, approached you.
No, I'll explain it. It's not... this is not me being very heroic. So the court is a very desolate kind of place, okay? On certain days, lots of people turn up in court. But that's the media. On event days, so to speak. I'll just give you a live example from what happened. So, but many days, I would not on many days, but there were quite a few days on which I found I was the only reporter there. Because I was interested in every little detail of the case. I mean, whoever, if the, the crematorium person who shoved the body into the fire, that person came also, I'd go and say, must be having to say something. So, what the public prosecutor and the CBI people once tried to do is complain about me to the judge because they didn't like, The judge is a very temperamental character. He used to love, he's retired now. He used to love throwing people out of court, not allowing them in. This case was special in the sense that we could not enter the courtroom. There was an attack on Dr. Talwar, again, in the premises itself, which some of you may have heard of. There was a guy with a meat cleaver who could have actually killed him. And that happened in the premises, and because of these security issues, so to speak, the media was told, no, you cannot come inside the court. I don't know why that happened. We are not carrying cleavers. But, no, we were not, honestly. So the thing was we had to wait. If I describe it to you, the court is really quite small. It's the size of the average drawing cum dining in a 3 BHK. That's the size of the courtroom. So you stand at the door, you take position, and you kind of get in early. So sometimes, in this 3-4 hours, I thought there's a very tempting bench inside there. Why don't I sit for a bit? But I had forgotten that the previous day I had written a piece rogering the CBI and what it was doing. And the moment I entered and sat on that bench, the counsel started jumping and saying, he is doing something illegal, he should never be allowed anywhere near, ban him from the premises and stuff like that. So I quickly...
After the printing of the book, after the book published, and did anybody in the CBI or the government or anybody came and said you shouldn't have done this?
No. In fact, what I find slightly worrying is this, that again they've resorted to the same kind of thing, which is sort of this selective leaks to discredit. Nobody from there I'd actually be happy to be engaged by that, because I'm happy to be corrected by anybody, including people in the CBI, that look, you've got it wrong. Here are the facts as they are, and you really got it wrong. But there's been no engagement at all on merits. The engagement is all about, so what is the motive behind writing such a book? What? Yeah. That's what's nothing heroic here.
Yeah. Lady there.
First of all, thank you for coming to Hyderabad.
Yeah.
I have two quick questions.
Sure.
My first question is, trial by media hampers the integrity of judiciary, especially when the matter is sub judice.
Right.
And these kind of speculations
Right.
in a national media or otherwise international media is really wrong. It shows, it throws wrong colors in the nation's, integrity. What is your say on this? It's not only judiciary alone, even journalism is bad, made bad.
So, I mean, let's just have a very quick understanding of what the sub judice law is and why it exists. The sub judice law really is quite simple. It is designed to protect witnesses from being influenced as they testify in court. They shouldn't read something in the media which influences them and makes them change what they might have otherwise said, swearing on the Gita or the Bible or whatever. Yeah? Now, so in this particular case, the sub judice stage is over. There are no more witnesses who are going to be called. So a book, a film, or whatever it is, it's gone beyond that. You could argue that, well, like by tradition or form says that you shouldn't because you'll be influenced the judge. But technically, I'm in the clear. That's as in like but you're talking about trial by media. It affects a case that has terrifying consequences. I think you're summing up pretty much what I said, over the last however many minutes. In that, you create an environment or an impression which makes it very easy for people to accept a guilty verdict or a not guilty, whichever way that wind is blowing. You make it very easy for those people and then forget about it altogether without going into the rational aspects of this case. That's trial by media for you. Yeah. Sorry, there's a gentleman at the back who wants to ask
my second question.
Oh, okay.
I'm really inquisitive, and there is a speculation that Aarushi Talwar was adopted. How far is it true?
No, that's not true. That's one of the many things. The Aarushi Talwar is not adopted. Nupur Talwar is not Mayawati's dentist. Yeah. They don't have dinner with the Prime Minister every evening.
Just to remind you, the books are for sale here and he is available to autograph them after the talk. So do that. Some Manthan merchandise is kept up for sale, some leftover bags from Samvad and t-shirts. You might want to pick them up for your use.
So this lady here. Yeah. Dakar. Pick it up.
Excuse me, I just want to know what was the motive behind all the spin that you have been sharing with us? The various, first of all, it is the new director versus the old. But was there a money angle to it?
No, I don't think there was. At least I can't prove it. I don't believe.
Can't prove it. Of course, we can understand, but
no, so I will not say.
Something like that comes to mind very easily.
It does, but not for me, ma'am. It doesn't for me. To answer that question, the answer is no.
Yeah, the motive for all the spin.
For all this, see, the Talwars were faced with. Forget all this big class politics, all the sort of larger angles to this case, and look at the individuals involved in it. The Talwars are faced with a trident of very interesting individuals who were crucial to their conviction. The first was an investigating officer who had a known track record of unscrupulousness and cutting corners and doing that just so that cases got closed. Right? He was on what's called the Officers of Doubtful Integrity list for the longest time within the CBI. Even as he was investigating this case. The Talwars never knew that. So that was him. And his track record is, again, it's delineated in the book. It's nothing, there's no, it's fairly public but not very well known. Second, there's a forensic scientist who's sitting in Gandhinagar who visits the scene 1.5 years after the crime, having smoked something probably. And then comes up with this fantastic theory which brings together, which ties up the initial suspicion by the police about this honor killing and God knows what, the father finding the daughter and compromising. And it's that kind of theory is really right up his street. I won't elaborate on this. I hope you will read the book about it. So that's him. So he also has a track record of imagining things. He did it in Godhra. That also is there in the book. The third guy, in Godhra he did something interesting. He said that that some people entered S6, that coach, and they broke all the glass, they threw petrol and they whatever, and then they left. Yeah. But some people survived that coach, that the fire, the arson there. And no witness remembers any such thing happening. So it's very weird that somebody comes in 2 months after that event. Again, he has a habit of also getting to the spot a little late. So yeah. So there was him. And then the third guy is this very interesting man, the judge himself, Shamlal. Shamlal is called, in many of the courts that he served in, Sazalal, he never acquits anybody. So that's what they were up against. I asked Chamlal if he remembered ever acquitting someone. I said, give me just one case in which you acquitted someone. He couldn't. So that's the simple.
Yeah, that lady.
Yeah. I'm not going to be asking questions more about the case. Mine is more about curiosity about how the process of writing the book. I'm sure everything that could be written about and could be supported, you put into the book. Rest of it, you're talking mentioning in your talks. I guess what couldn't be put into the book. When you were covering this case, at which stage did you think of making it into a book? And did you have a publisher before you got the book, or you got the book and went into the publishing?
Simpler.
And just one little thing,
Sure.
You were mentioning how you were going to sit on the bench, and then the judge was supposed to throw you out, and then you were interrupted. I really was interested in what happened after that.
So what I did is I leapt out of the room straight away, and I pretended as if I had never entered in the first place. I said, I was outside. The judge still called me in, and then he said, why are you misbehaving? I said, I was not, my lord. So, and it was kind of okay. We got along. And he told me then come and have a cup of tea with me later on. It was okay.
Before just
so I'll answer your question. Sorry, she asked the question. Very quickly, I had never thought of it. I knew that there was potential for a book there, but really it was very nice of a top editor, Chiki Sarkar, from Penguin. She was a publisher and editor. She had seen some of my reports in the Mumbai Mirror, and she called me and she said, do you want to make this into a book? And we sat in Khan Market and we decided that we would. That's how it happened.
Yeah. Two quick ones.
Yes, ma'am.
The other three suspects, in your talk, you didn't talk much about them.
Right.
But if you could just see how they're letting them off. No, that's one.
Yeah.
And the second question is that we have, as a civil society which responds to consumers of the state, we have almost a moral obligation to protest or to seek accountability from the three pillars of governance, the executive and this thing, and one of them is the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where the executive and legislature is, of course, we're all very popular, fond of, hang these politicians, they're all bad, and the officers, officials, etc. But there is a deep hesitation of challenging the judiciary. Do you think it's time to challenge the communal and the unjust and the credibility and the integrity of the judiciary? Because
I applaud the question.
When issues are made of integrity of this country, then we're all a little confused.
Let's just use a milder word than challenge. Let's talk about talking about the judiciary. Let's put it that way. And I totally support that, because I'll just go. A lot of the time, I've now met quite a few people in the profession, and really there's a big disconnect between the lower judiciary and what's happening up there. And even what's happening up there, if you go through the drafting of some judgments in higher courts, you'll be appalled. You really will be appalled. I was mentioning Nithari before this. One of the things that happened in Nithari is that one of the suspects said that his animal instincts were aroused because his master was a debauch. And he would drink and whatever, call prostitutes. And because these animal instincts were aroused, he went and killed 18 people. The judge says, oh, I see. In that case, if these instincts were not aroused by this man's debauchery, then these murders would not have happened. So he is complicit in the murder. How the hell you go from here to there is baffling, but not to judges.
I have a collateral question to that. Was there a moment for you during the entire case where you could say that your faith in the judiciary has been restored?
That question presumes that I don't have faith in the judiciary. Which is not true. I do have some faith in it.
All right.
So here's the thing. There was one... absolute faith is a silly thing. Sorry. So at one point, actually, what was lacking in this case, it's a great question, is that can some judge, please sit down and look at the evidence properly, not go by, just look at it properly. Can this happen? And this was happening in the case of some scientific evidence. It's great that you brought that up, because a lot of the judiciary is not trained to handle scientific evidence. They don't know. They actually don't know. What is DNA? I mean, if the public prosecutor is saying, Dr. Talwar was drinking whiskey neat, and when you drink whiskey neat, you can never find DNA on the mouth of the bottle because whiskey wipes DNA off. This is the kind of science that is going on. One high court said that no, you need to, just for the interest of fairness, that many of the reports that you have and the worksheets that you have, I don't know how many of you are scientists here. If you are, then you know what I'm talking about. It's not just the report. It's what goes into it which really is your body of evidence, because a lot of this stuff a lot of these sciences are sciences of interpretation. So an independent sort of appraisal is healthy and good in the interest of justice. So they wanted this stuff, and one court said you must have this stuff. So I thought, well, this is a wise court. But then when it came back to the court that is actually supposed to direct them to get this stuff, the CBI said, we don't have anything. It is no point giving the defense blank printouts. That was accepted. So, it kind of went seesaw flip-flop.
Couple of questions. I can't resist a horrible pun, but I think there was more character assassination in this than murder.
Couple of questions, actually, going on about character assassination, because I was involved with a group of lawyers in Boston. We used to look at the transcript of O.J. Simpson's case.
Right.
All right, which went on for 9 months, and the kind of circus it was that.
Right.
And some of us used to report back to Richard Nissen, who was a professor of evidence and who used to work on the Simpson case. And one of the big problems there was also about the inability of judges to really understand scientific evidence. And it happens in many other... No, it's not just in criminal cases. Criminal cases, it can be very problematic. But it also happens in a lot of other cases, such as patents, or even in civil cases.
And
how do you deal?
There'll be digital evidence, which is again
another huge problem. In fact, we are likely to face that in another case here. What's the integrity of digital evidence? After all, it's only text. Ultimately, your digital video is nothing but text.
Right.
And the text can always be manipulated. Right. So there are problems about that, undoubtedly.
Yeah, sure.
Now, one of the important points that you said was that trial court judges might just kick the problem up for multiple reasons.
Right.
Pressure, work pressure. It could be, well, I don't want to get blamed as the bad guy because, the media is going to really go after me or attribute motives to me.
Sure.
Now, unfortunately, I think it getting to be an open season on judiciary, it would mean the same pressure would now apply on the appellate courts also, including the Supreme Court. And one of the reasons why I'm saying this is because I happen to, at that point of time, some of these Supreme Court justices who had, at one point, Harish Salve had applied for anticipatory bail and was granted, and I'd met them, and they were talking about this pressure.
Yeah.
They were actually talking about this pressure and saying, it is really tough to be able to handle this pressure. But they gave him the anticipatory bail because they said this is nonsensical. After all, CBI had given a closure report.
Right.
What is your sense about how do you think it'll pan out as a journalist? Having really examined the lower court functioning and how the media pressure impacts them. Do you think there could be a follow-up research about its impact on the higher judiciary?
Well, I should hope so, definitely. Because, it's time to at least have that conversation. Up to now, and I start with, again, my trade, media. We are told, it's a courtroom, so you just don't write anything except for the stenography that you're doing over there. You're not supposed to write anything else. and the desk is told, don't touch anything in this copy because it's a court copy. Not true. That's not how these things work. I mean, anyone who reads Article 19 of the Constitution knows that you have freedom of expression to a reasonable limit. And reasonable is a very, very big word. Basically, you have to establish some kind of clear and present danger in what you're writing to. Things like the contempt law, again, can very easily be got around. To answer your question more directly, it's, what happens, is this conversation taking place at all? Like, this is coming up quite a bit because I was speaking to a judge who is in the Bombay High Court. He happens to be, somebody who's a friend of mine. So he told me, look, if 60 of us, that's the largest bench, sit down in a room together and start discussing something like the ban on beef, right? There is no agreement. And there is no agreement for precisely the same reasons that there's no agreement in civil society. Because people have different educational levels, they have different attitudes, they watch different television serials. So, but is it important to have that conversation? I mean, I would think so. But really it's up to them. So far, what has happened is that the pedestal has been built by them and they are on it themselves. And good luck, I mean, that's fine. If that's the way it works, it's fine. But as a consumer of that system, and that's the point I'm making, it is also 1 paisa of my tax that goes into the maintenance of that Lutyens bungalow, isn't it? So I have, I think, a right to at least to ask. And without asking, as they say, you won't get anything.
Yeah. I think the issue is much deeper than taxpayers' money, taxpayers' contributions. It's all a question of whether we will remain a society that's worth living in, whether will remain a civilized society where individual rights, liberties, our own freedoms are sacrosanct.
Yeah, thank you for that.
It goes so deep into.
I think this is not really off topic. For me, it is on topic as well. And it's a great question.
That's the whole point of understanding.
So I have again, it's something that's formulated now over the last few years, just by thinking about not just this case, but also our current environment. You know what? I have to go and give talks on tolerance and stuff like that quite a lot as well. Now that, some books are selling. So one of the things that comes up with this issue of tolerance, and I find the debate in most of these places where I go and speak on panels and stuff like that, is somehow veers around to the tolerance of religion, religious tolerance, communal tolerance. I actually have a different take on it. I think it's far more fundamental than that. I think there's an atmosphere or a climate of intolerance against rationality. And this is the problem. Because, I mean, just because I'm saying something reasonable, I'll be shot. It's weird. Do you know that in Pune there was a rationalist who was shot? I went from rationality to rationalist. Not, it's not literally in that sense. I think everyone here understands what I'm saying. So this guy, he gets shot by some fringe group, and then the police start investigating who may have killed this person. How do they go about investigating it? They say they don't have too many leads, so they conduct a seance. Yes. Planchet.
Who conducts this seance?
The police.
No kidding.
In Pune. I kid, I'm a non-fiction writer.
The police conduct a seance.
Yeah. That is the line of investigation.
And
so, I mean, sir, no, a lot of stuff, sir, you will find is truly, truly bizarro.
I think you need to explain what's a seance to
planchet. I mean, like calling the dead back from wherever they are.
Calling the spirits to find out where the...
Yeah.
Who killed?
Who killed you? I mean... So in this case, when I say suspension of rationality and the intolerance of it, is that one of this judge, very wise judge, he sets out 26 circumstances which suggest to him that the Talwars are guilty. I'll give you 2 of them. One of the circumstances is there was nobody moving around suspiciously in the neighborhood that night. Therefore, you were in the flat. So there was therefore no outsider could have come because nobody was moving around suspiciously, remember? There was a court case recently, again I kid you not, in Bombay, where a chap got arrested and one of the charges against him was that he had been picked up for drinking tea suspiciously. There's a judgment, I can forward it on to this. So the judge says that this is a very, really articulate, very nice, good guy. I salute him, Gautam Patel. He's on the bar now. I mean on the bench now. So he says, he describes him quite delightfully, that one has heard of or is aware of many, many ways of drinking tea. You can have it with lime, you can have it cutting, you can soak it, you can boil it, but suspiciously drinking tea or slurping it beautifully, right? So, but it's true. So he was drinking tea suspiciously, so he's put in jail. And he has to go to court. This is bizarre. I mean, how, where are we, where is this part of India gone?
No, but the tragedy is, it was Talwar. Tomorrow it could be you or I.
Precisely, sir. That's the,
and,
I think
it could be by an accident of circumstances or it could be intentionally.
Yeah, it could be anything.
And it could, so these things become far more important for us.
Yeah. Sure,
I'm Thomas. Before coming here, I have somebody, a friend of mine, maybe 20 years elder. We spoke, why should we go for that? I said, we can learn something there. Because I read 3 newspapers, I don't know anything about Aarushi murder case. Because the moment I came to know that a young girl is killed, I give chocolates to young boys and girls. I choose not to read because it was too painful. Right. But I have a question. Whenever there is a girl in a case, always, since the ancient days, she is always suspected to be wrong. It happened with Aarushi also.
Yeah.
It happened with Draupadi also. She loved, so there is suspicion. And the way the Sita is asked to go into the fire. Why is this happening and how can we avoid such things?
Look, I'm not a sociologist or a historian, so anyway, but I see the question. I see where it's coming from. And when I said that there was an underlying misogyny, which is the hatred of whatever, and intolerance towards women, that's palpable in all our lives. It's true. It's a reality. Sorry? No, again, I don't take the absolute position that everybody's like this. No, it can't be. I mean, there are sensible people as well. There are standard best practices or international guidelines that you must follow. Right? Especially important in the kind of environment we live in terms of, say, terror, for instance, is an international thing. Now, if you have a lab which does not conform to the best practices abroad, and you have, say, a very important terror suspect or a breakthrough, and the lab gets discredited because it's not, its standards aren't high enough, there's a problem. Secondly, therefore, they must open themselves up to some scrutiny. In India, very strangely, at least in this case, and I think in all others, a forensic report from a lab, the defense is seldom given it to verify or to have it appraised by an independent authority on the subject. So those things, I mean, that's only fair, isn't it? Like I said, there's a cozy relationship between the CBI and the forensic labs here, and that has to be broken. The simple way to put this is that there's a conflict of interest here, and it doesn't serve justice.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mine is not actually a question, it is more of an observation and a little statement. There are a group of us who belong to who are a part of a book club. And this was one of the books which we read recently.
Right.
And while we were discussing the book, it came out so clearly that as one is reading the book, what one feels is a helpless enragement.
Yeah.
He was so angry.
Yeah.
And again, it is helpless because there was nothing much we could do, but we could talk about it. And like Jasmine was saying that, okay, civil societies, what can you do? But actually it just remains a talk in the drawing rooms. And it also makes us question how much can you believe and put our trust in the police or in a judiciary system.
Right.
Like you said, I believe in the judiciary in a limited fashion.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't even go that far. And again, a book like this makes me scared. I was very scared that tomorrow something happens, God forbid, something happens to my child, and I am seen in suspicious circumstances. I'm not, maybe I'm not sorry enough. I look too happy, perhaps. Yeah. I'm wearing bright clothes, so I'm not, I'm really not bothered by my child's whatever has happened. So these are some of the things which really, really disturbed us, and we were thinking if there was something which we could do.
See,
I would just kind of pass it on and maybe.
Sure.
We're all a part of the same group, so we were discussing the book, and I think one of the things that worried a lot of us was the deep cultural disconnect that is there between a lot of us and the people who are standing in judgment or investigating us.
Correct.
And because of that disconnect, cultural disconnect and the perceptional disconnect, we find that more and more, a lot of us are in the minority and on the defensive.
Well, that's a comment, so I'm...
Sir, the last one, Very good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Very thankful for your presentation. Very sorry that I did not recognize you before the start of the talk. Under the tree we sat beside you only. I'm talking with my known person for that. My query to you, in your life, have you came across to open the court in the midnight, whichever the case studies, right from the civil matters, individual crime or the murder or whatever it you take, from the subordinate court to the extreme apex court. In my life, I saw which came in this year only, the open in the midnight too, but the repeated judgments pronounced by the courts to the individual. One, the same question to you. And you take about this Aarushi case. We saw about so many the painful, agonyful, by reading the newspaper. Yes, of course, still happening. But now, in this particular case study, who is I mean to say that one, who is the one culprit?
Who is the culprit? Okay. Thank you for the question. So, here's the thing. I think I am not a judge and neither am I an investigator. So, I will not be able to tell you who the culprit is, honestly. What I can do for you, however, is present to you as many facts as I have uncovered or as are out there in the most coherent form, and then you make up your mind. Sure.
My friend was saying, about this cultural disconnect.
Yeah.
So there's already this prejudice built up.
Right.
So how fair is this whole thing? And my question is, do you foresee anything that is going to be done after the publishing of this book, the movie? Do you think there will be, any kind of way out for these, relook at the case?
See, here's the thing, there's no need to relook at the case as such. There isn't. There are systems, the system itself, as it's laid out, is robust enough, if it wants to be, in the execution of the system. There is no problem. It is a 3-tier system. No system is perfect, so someone might get it wrong, something can be corrected later on, right? So there's no need to, some people are speculating retrial and reopen the case, X, Y, Z. There's no need. That system already exists. It needs to be heard by a trial court in the normal course, and that judge needs to actually treat the case on merit. That's all that's required here for a reversal to happen or an upholding of it. And then he will explain to us why he's upholding or reversing. I'm waiting for that day, really. So I'm a journalist, not an activist.
Congratulations to you. I mean,
Thank you.
Out of all the journalists to think that one person had this, to bring it out like this, it's really
No, I mean,
great.
come on, everyone works. So each of us does his own thing.
Thank you everyone for a wonderful evening. Thank you, Avirook.